So functional behavior assessment, first of all, is based on some assumptions and some values, really. One of the primary things is about dignity of the individual. Right? So behavior support has to be conducted with dignity as the primary concern. And so that's kind of important. From the perspective of the individual, we need to understand that problem behavior is absolutely reasonable and functional. From the perspective of the kid engaging in problem behavior, or if you're working with a teen or an adult, from their perspective, problem behavior makes absolute sense, right? It may not make sense to us, right? But from their perspective, it really does make absolute sense. There is a reason why they're doing it, and it's not just to like bug you. It really isn't. And so although it's hard sometimes, we've got to remember that. We've got to remember that, I may not understand why you're doing this. This may not seem like it makes a lot of sense to me, but to you, it makes sense for you to be doing what you're doing. And my job is to try and understand that, okay? The goal of functional behavior assessment, in addition to addressing problem behavior, defining what they are and eliminating or reducing them, is to also understand the structure, the contexts, and the function for those problem behaviors. So why it is that those problem behaviors occur. Do they occur to get somebody's attention? Do they occur to get out of a task I don't like? That helps us figure out what other behaviors to teach. Right? So if I understand why you engage in your problem behavior, I can teach you a different behavior that gets you essentially the same thing, which is one of the things that we'll need to address. So we'll be talking about that as we go through today. Functional behavior assessment involves looking at relationships between behavior and environment. So I mentioned earlier that the problem isn't just within the person who's engaging in problem behavior. Right? The environment plays a big role in whether or not behavior occurs. Any of you been in situations where you say, or you've noticed, seems that I'm the only one he engages in problem behavior with. He's fine with dad, grandma, the SCA, the babysitter, the whoever, right? There's always like that one really annoying person that your kid is fine with, who doesn't have a lot of problem behavior, right? And it seems like it's just you. It's not just you, but there are likely some environmental differences that are going on that make it either more likely you're gonna have problem behavior with this child or that somebody else isn't. Okay, so we're going to look at environmental things and how that environmental behavior connection comes into play. So with a functional behavior assessment, at the end of the assessment, I want to know what the problem behaviors are. I need a good definition of those behaviors. I need to know the relevant setting events. And setting events are things that set the stage for problem behavior. So my question around this topic is, first of all, who are my morning coffee people? Must have morning coffee. Okay, good. Did you have it? Jeff, okay, good, excellent. So nobody's going to be throwing stuff at me. Wonderful. How many of you are morning coffee people to the point where you roll out of bed and immediately go make your coffee? Who are those people? Okay. Are there any people who are the people who set their coffee maker the night before and set the cup out so that they stumble from bed and just have to pour it? Any of those? Okay, so did you have your coffee? Okay, good, so I'm safe. Perfect, right? What you guys are doing with your whole coffee behavior is managing a setting event. Because what happens if you don't have your coffee? Are you a little snippier? People don't want to be around you, right? Are you the people who everybody in your household knows if you haven't had your cup of coffee yet, they should sort of stay away? Perfect, right? So you know a little bit about setting events. That's kind of the stuff that we're talking about. We want to figure out what are setting events for your child. And we're going to talk today about sort of some specific categories of setting events to get you thinking about those things. But coffee for many of us is an issue. If we don't have our coffee, that's a setting event. So we want to know those for a kid. We also want to know the antecedent triggers. And by triggers, this is, I say brush your teeth and the kid has a tantrum. I say, eat your spinach, and the kid has a tantrum. Those are the triggers, right? I ask you to do this often, right? Or I go and start to do laundry and leave you alone, or I answer the phone. How many of you have kids where if you pick up the phone, it's all over, right? Game over. Okay, so those are all antecedents. Then we want to understand what the consequences are that are paying off problem behavior. So if the problem behavior occurs, what happens afterwards essentially to stop the behavior from happening? And that's often the payoff. So we're going to talk about those today. And when we understand what those reinforcers are, those consequences that pay off, we can understand the function. Okay? And functions, right, are just purpose, right? Behavior serves a purpose. All behavior serves a purpose. And the FBA looks to figure that out. And purposes or functions typically fall under one of two broad categories. Either what is the person getting with their problem behavior, or what is the person avoiding with their problem behavior. Typically falls under one of those. Okay? So to identify the function, we have to look at the primary payoff, the primary reinforcer.